All right, welcome in to the Patriots Beat Patriots Daily post-draft crossover episode. Alex Barth, Tayler Kyles, Brian Hines, Mike Kadlick here, coming to you after the Patriots made 11 picks in the 2025 NFL Draft, and we are going to run through all of them in the next hour or so as we put a bow on draft weekend for 2025. Gentlemen, how are we feeling? Everybody rested? Anybody get any sleep last night? How we doing?
A little more sleep. I got a good Brian. Right. There's Brian. I actually got a decent night's sleep. We got off our show and I basically was just like, you know what? I gotta call it here. I scrolled Twitter. I did the thing. I didn't do much post-draft coverage, I'll be frank. So I'm not as tired as you guys, but I'm ready to wrap it up today. That's for damn sure.
I got really excited.
Some
honestly.
of us did.
Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
God, there's something going on here. I really tried to turn my brain off, but the undrafted free agent class really got me hyped up. So I did not get as much sleep as I thought I was going to, but I mean, that's the trade-off for covering a fun team, apparently. So it could be worse.
I was up this morning, Sunday kickoff. Thanks for everybody who tuned into that and this, keeping it going. So this is the last thing for me. So you can tell I got the energy. The light is at the end of the tunnel, but the Patriots did make 11 picks. So we do have a lot to talk about. 11 picks, 5 trades. Nobody is allowed to yell at me and Brian next year for making too many trades in the mock draft and saying it's unrealistic. I'm sorry. What was it? 220 for 251 and 257. Brian, that's the exact trade we make when we can't figure out which player we want to take. And everybody in the chat, who cares? Too many trades. No, we're playing the game. That's what we're doing.
That trade just threw off the complete end to our draft coverage because we didn't know how we were going to wrap things up. We were going to do a round 7 wrap up, and then we decided, you know what? Let's just go live for these 2 picks in the 7th round and then call it. And then they traded to the final pick of the draft. So we had to waste like 45, 50 minutes. Brian came into the show laying on the ground of his attic, basically, and just kind of hung out for a while. But we got through it. We made it work. But yeah, it kind of threw a wrench into things, concluding our like 12 plus hours of weekend coverage. So.
But honestly, the people in the chat made it a lot more fun. Like we started talking about shows. Also, they started flooding us with cash. That definitely helped. So thanks again for all that.
Good trade-off.
Yeah.
So we'll get to Mr. Relevant and we'll go down there. But let's start at the top. Honestly, I don't know how much needs to be said here for the simple reason that this pick was talked to death for the last 4 months. But now that the pick is in, just your final thought on the drafting of Will Campbell. Taylor, we'll start with you.
I think I had reached acceptance already, and I knew this was going to be a pick that I probably felt better about once we heard more about Will Campbell and got all the stories where it's like, yeah, okay, the leadership, but how exactly does that look in a Patriots setting? And that's where I probably would have leaned more B+ with my grade yesterday, but I gave it really more of an A- because I really do think that, one, if there's a position group where having one guy who is the tone setter is going to make a difference, it's offensive line because they're so close. And Will Campbell is going to be that one, a 10-year vet. Like everyone says it. Freaking Braden Swinson said it about him. And if you get that kind of guy on your offensive line, whether he plays guard or tackle, I think it's a good value. And I also do think that he can play left tackle. The more I've heard from, people I trust to evaluate the position, it's really not a matter of if he can hang there. Maybe he's just going to be very good at best, but that's better than the majority of teams can say about their left tackle spot. So I'm very happy about it. Excited to have him in the building.
Brian.
Yeah, there's definitely still some concerns, right? Like there's only a select amount of people in the league who can play tackle with those measurements that we've talked so much about over the last few months. But you do, he's played the position in the SEC at LSU for 3 years. Like he's going to start out there. That's the biggest position in need. And then you get into the off the field stuff where he's going to die for Drake May out there. He's such a leader, right? He was a captain, 2-time captain at LSU. He wore the 7 patch as their top playmaker. So there's a lot to like about the character in the person. And again, it was such a need that you felt like they just kind of had to do that. And he's going to start for you as you hope, 10 years along the offensive line at some point. So again, there's risk with it, but they kind of had to do that at the top of the draft.
Also wild, they now
Mike,
have
your
2
thoughts?
guys who had the 7 patch at LSU.
Yeah.
Say that again.
They have not had. They have. They 2 together.
Yo, yeah, no, they have. I thought I said have. But
Okay,
yeah,
yeah.
they have 2 guys who had the 7 patch at LSU.
I mean, that is a first of all,
And by the way, I
wish
wouldn't hate if they had Harold Perkins next year.
Yeah.
Very Mike Vrabel-like player. So let's complete the set. Mike, go ahead.
The only thing that bums me out about the number 7 thing with Campbell, and that is a long line of Kayshon Bouttys and Tyrann Matthews, and you can name a whole bunch of them. I wish they actually let him wear the number 7 on his jersey. That would be electric if he was just out there at left tackle wearing it. They make so many college number rules. You would think you would just allow offensive linemen to wear single digits, but
and he's thin, so it would actually look good on him. Like, it would look weird on a big guy, but he's pretty narrow, so the 7, it would look sleek.
He wore it in practice, didn't he? And it looked like
think
Yeah,
so.
it was only on game
normal.
days. He wore
Yeah.
66. So I
That's
thought
a-
maybe he'd bump up to, or he should have worn 77
yeah,
in
he
college.
should have.
And that's what we're here. But
I agree. But no, go ahead.
go ahead, Mike.
Just on the pick, it's as Taylor said, we sort of started to accept it around here that it was just gonna, it was gonna be Will Campbell, and they weren't gonna trade back, and they weren't gonna, throw the Jaguars haul to go up and get Travis Hunter, and it just, it's a good pick. It's a really good pick. I give it a solid, I don't know if we're grading them here, but like an A-. I think it works. It's what they needed. They need to sort of set the bedrock for this leadership group of this team, and if that's spending the number 4 pick on someone who, yeah, he might be a guard, but he might be one of the best guards in the league or even just a foundational piece of your offensive line for the next 10 years, then that's okay. And that works for me. So look, he might not be a top 5 tackle, but he'll be serviceable, and he'll sort of set the standard for this team for a long time alongside Drake May. So no, it's a good pick, and it's a pick they kind of just had to make. There was no real, when it came down to it, there are much more options really at number 4. That's what happens when you win game number 8, game in week 18 with Gerard Mayo and Joe Milton. So that's what had to happen, and it's the right pick.
I'll just go back to it. He was the best. It was the best pick they could have made, given what was available. Right, is the best pick for Drake May.
Mm-hmm.
And that ultimately is what's best for the football team. They did what's best for Drake May, who is their best asset. They made the pick that will help Drake May become the best player he can be, and that's what's best for the New England Patriots. So for me, in that case, if you want to argue whether or not he's the best left tackle, I mean, we just spent 4 months doing that. I thought he was, and the best left tackle on the board was the best pick for Drake May, and they took the best left tackle on the board. That idea of doing what's best for Drake May also continued, and I think was heavily the theme on day 2, and we'll move on now to some of the guys that we haven't collectively talked about yet. And we'll start with pick 38, Travion Henderson, running back from Ohio State. How about this, guys? As dominant as Ohio State has been, he is only the 3rd Buckeye the Patriots have picked in the last 50 years, joining, fourth Buckeye the Patriots have picked in the last 50 years, joining Terry Glenn, Andy Katzenmoyer, and Nate Ebner. So I think with Mike Vrabel here, they're probably going to dip into that talent pool a little more. Travion Henderson starts it off. Explosive back. Explosive, big play threat. People are going to kind of comp him to James White. He can play in that role. I think he can do more than just play in that role. And that's what's exciting to me, is that the one knock on the situational running back splits, which is fair, is the offense can become predictable. Even though they won in 18, I remember that being the storyline throughout that season. It was like when Sony Michel was in the game, I think they ran the ball like 65% of the time, 70% of the time, something like that. And it was a legitimate concern. Now, they were so freaking good at running the ball, it didn't really matter, but it is a consideration. Well, I think with Henderson, he's a guy that can be a feature back. Most of the times when they did that split, the feature back was the early down back guy. This could look a little different, where the feature back is the passing down back. Brian, your thoughts on Travion Henderson?
Well, first of all, Barth, we nailed the pick. Pat's beat Friday morning, and then Taylor got on board too.
We did.
But I love the
Taylor
player.
texted me about it, I think Thursday night.
I think I was like, that was when I was like, I got to start watch. I got to like get this guy on my radar because he's so good. And yeah, we were all on the same page.
You were like,
we were talking about him, and then I walk into Gillette, and I'm like, Tayler, who are you watching on film? And he's like, Travion Henderson. And I'm like, there we go. Stars are aligned. So I love the player. Like you mentioned, the explosiveness. Like he has the ability to flip the field. And the pass catching work, pass catching, like Josh McDaniels is going to have a field day with this guy. You can move him around the formation. He's such a mismatch. Go watch him out wide against Purdue, that double move and the ball tracking ability. Watch his pass pro highlights. Like it is really fun to watch. You mentioned James White. Like this is a faster, more explosive James White that can also play on early down. So he is a tremendous back. You needed that explosiveness. Again, someone who can flip the field in an instant into this offense. So I don't love necessarily running back at 38, top of the second round, the positional value, but I love the player. And so I'm not going to get on them too much for taking the best player available on their board. And that definitely seemed like Henderson.
Mike.
Yeah, I'll echo what Brian said about the value of a running back at pick 38. But when we get into the rest of their day 2 haul, which we will in a second, like it made sense. And they still were able to fill the wide receiver hole that I thought they should have early on day 2, which, they ended up doing a little bit later on. And so, no, as far as the player goes, it adds another dynamic, skill set to their offense. Somebody that isn't just going to run the football. He's going to catch the ball out of the backfield. He's like a 6th offensive lineman in pass protection. His pass protection is arguably his best, his best attribute. And so, yeah, I'm sort of anti-running back sometimes, but with when they did it, where they did it, that's kind of the question mark. But as Brian said, and Elliot Wolf told us, they sort of had a conversation with where they were going to go at that junction of the draft. And when it came down to it, their other player was gone anyway. So they just went with the best player at consensus. And again, where I'm at with running backs is don't hitch your wagon to one and kind of rotate them through. So if this is what they do with Henderson and they start to, maybe move off someone like Ramondre a little bit early and he's your guy for the next couple of years, then that's fine with me. So again, the rest of the haul made it more acceptable to me, but he's a great player and he's going to help their offense.
Tayler, you were in on Ashton Jeanty, and then obviously that didn't happen. And I feel like a lot of the Jeanty people pivoted and then got in on Travion Henderson. Is that just similarities? Was it best running back available? And do you feel like they're going to maybe get something out of Henderson that you were hoping they would get out of Jeanty?
Yeah, because for me, the only reason I even consider Jeanty was because if you're going to invest premium capital in the running back, they have to do everything, right? Not just like Ramondre, where it's like, yeah, you can catch passes in the flat, you can catch screens and do that effectively. You need to be able to get out of the backfield and run effective routes and be able to produce downfield is really where I start to say like, okay, I understand because you're a matchup threat. I wasn't even really looking at those early down backs because I figured it would be more of like a LaQuint Allen, a Woody Marks kind of guy that I went for, maybe a Cam Scatabo. But then after Jeanty, had to look at Travion, and he does the same thing where he really is. Usually, if you're a great blocker, and that's the first thing people mention, it's condescending as a running back because that's like your third job. But he's so good at it. It's not an insult. He is just like on a different level because he's trying to plant people consistently, but he also isn't over aggressive, at least from what I saw, where he's throwing his body and putting the quarterback at risk. Then as a runner, honestly, I see him as more of like a Rex Burkhead type than a James White, but like obviously a souped up Rex Burkhead, where Rex could also like carry the ball 15, 20 times a game. If you needed him to be the guy that week, like, and the Josh McDaniels offenses, it could be a different guy every week. They would just kind of ride the hot hand. Henderson is that kind of guy where he, like Burkhead, could be a receiver. He could be a running back. The drive against the Rams, the scoring drive where McDaniels just had the same grouping and they just marched down the field. It was because they had Burkhead where you really didn't know. I think the Rams actually said when they put Rex out there with Devlin, they were like, we don't really know how to defend this because this guy's actually a receiver. That's what Henderson gives you. And I love the idea of putting him on the field with Antonio Gibson or Lamb Larson, because those are guys who legitimately can run the ball or be receivers, and they're going to be matchup nightmares. So, yeah, I was late on board, but because Travion is someone who does so many things at a high level and protects the football, that's the biggest thing. Where there were some guys with similar skill sets, but they put the ball on the ground sometimes. This guy's 2 fumbles in his entire career, and he's a proven guy. I really like it, knowing that he's going to be in a committee where he's never going to really have to be the guy.
Yeah, so for me, it's a case of with the first pick, and a big part of the debate, more so than the individual players when we were getting ready for this draft, was best player available versus drafting for need and how much weight you should put on a premium position. And I think the Patriots went to the extremes with their first two picks. Will Campbell, not to say he was not a great player, but Will Campbell was a needs pick at a premium position. They then come back out at 38, and except for one guy I'll talk about in a second, there is a case that Travion Henderson was the best player available. Obviously not a premium position, but they went BPA. The guy Henderson's going to be compared to for his entire career, at least in New England, is Luther Burden, because the Patriots needed an explosive receiver. Burden certainly was that. Went with the next pick. I don't think Burden was on their board because of his...
Similarly, too, funny enough, when you think about it. The design touches that Burden got, they had similar uses in their offenses.
Well, so I'm going to get to this. I'll take that similarity a step further in a minute, but I don't think he was going to be on the board because I don't think he was a personality fit. That's going to be the comparison. It would have bothered me more if not for, at pick 69, the Patriots getting Kyle Williams, who I think stylistically, not the same, but a similar receiver to Luther Burden in the sense that he's a threat at all three levels. He had speed. He really improved after the catch. And I wrote about this on 985thesportshub.com, really improved after the catch, which I think was the biggest thing. And he even said was the biggest thing that led to his breakout year in 2025. This guy is one, I think for the Patriots in particular, this is one of those picks where, you know, I love talking about nature versus nurture, right? And not every landing spot is the same for every player. I feel so, I can't tell you how nervous I feel saying this about a wide receiver to the Patriots. So let me preface that. But in terms of his skill set with what Josh McDaniels looks for and his skill set with what he can learn from a guy like Stephon Diggs, it's a seamless fit. It should be. Let me say that. It should be a seamless fit. We'll see if they screw it up and how they'll find a way to screw it up. But like, Mike, this was the guy that was on my radar for a long time, gives them a lot of things they need. I think they got him at good value at 69. And then to offset, you know, passing on Burden, and another guy's going to be compared, two guys will be compared. The question will be, who would you rather have, Luther Burden or Kyle Williams and Travion Henderson? But I think they helped themselves out with Kyle Williams.
And the only reason I laugh at that is because a year ago today we were doing would you rather have Ladd McConkey or Jalen Polk and Javon Baker? So, you know, well, like you said, preface it with that. But no, the Kyle Williams pick makes the Henderson pick that much better in my eyes, as I was saying before.
Good way to put it.
They needed a wide receiver who can separate, and Kyle Williams does that, and the way he can get off the line of scrimmage. And like the comparison to Diggs, I like. He kind of reminds me of Stephon Diggs, and I look at it, and first of all, he was one of the fastest risers in the draft class lately, and you know people hate that word, and it's kind of cliche, but all of a sudden people were sort of turned on to him over the last, call it 6-7 weeks. And I love it. I think when we look at, I guess, like mock draft land, it felt like as we were looking at it from a Patriots perspective, if Kyle Williams was going to be here at 69, that was going to be the pick. It almost felt Steelers-y to me, where there was a couple of years where the Steelers were at pick like 20-ish in the first round, and everybody thought, well, they're going to just land Najee Harris. They're the one team that's going to land Harris here. Or they're the one team that's going to land Kenny Pickett. And he just kind of fell in their laps. And some people might have called it a reach, but I think this is the perfect fit, perfect team for a guy in Drake May who desperately needs wide receiver help. And now there's sort of a couple tiers of that room where there's the veterans, there's the second, third year guys who can kind of fill a need if you need them to. And now you have a young rookie in Kyle Williams who you can develop hopefully into an eventual wide receiver one-ish alongside Drake May. So I think this was the right pick for that time, and it sort of really put a bow, or I guess the next pick put a bow on their day 2 haul, which we'll get to. But no, I love the pick. I think it makes a ton of sense.
Taylor, how you feeling about this one?
I was a big fan of this one. I took Kyle Williams with the second, third round pick in one of my mock drafts. So I liked him and Jalen Noel in that range. I thought they would be really good fits in this offense because they brought verticality. Like when we talked about Jaden Higgins as a potential target for them, I didn't like it because I thought he just gave them another possession receiver who doesn't have a lot of juice downfield and doesn't separate particularly well. Kyle Williams does all of those things. And the concerns are that, okay, he was a late breakout, and then he doesn't have maybe the frame you want as someone who's probably going to be a primary X receiver, even though obviously with Josh, he'll move around the formation. But Kyle Williams is the first X they've had in a long time who isn't the sacrificial X, right? He's not just running go routes all the time because he's so dynamic with the ball on screens, on short throws. Like he said, you mentioned Barth, he really wants to be able to be a guy who can turn hitches or slants into those long scores. And he does it because his contact balance is a lot better than you'd think looking at him. We're like, if there's plays where guys have both hands and try to grab him down, and if they're not strong enough, he'll just run right through on top of tracking the ball very well, being able to make some contested grabs. So he has some work to do as a route runner, but that's where him being with Stephon Diggs is so exciting. And when Steve Smith compares you to him, and the only other guy he's done that to is Jamar Chase, I'm on board. I don't got to be an expert at that point. I'm pretty excited. So, and even I remember with Javon Baker, he had him on, and he liked Javon, but he also had concerns, right? He said he's like a wild stallion. He was questioning the hands and all that, and all of those things kind of came to the forefront on top of some other things for Baker. So the Steve Smith seal of approval got me very excited for this one.
Real quick, Brian, before we get to you, Taylor. So you mentioned him as the X and not being a sacrificial X. And they talked last night, I think it was Elliot Wolf talked about him being able to play all three positions, X, Z, slot. I view him as more of a Z in the NFL. I think he's a guy you move around. So I'm just like, I'm like
so many. They have so many Z's.
Well, so this is what I wonder. Do they do a thing where it's multiple? Because they have a lot of Z's, but they have a lot of guys who are multiple. Do they rotate him and Diggs in Bourne between the Z and the X position? Or is it something where do you think Mac Hollins or Kayshon Boutte is at the X and they're cramming all that speed on the strong side and all that explosiveness on the strong side with Williams and Diggs once he's healthy and Pop kind of rotating in the Z slot? Because I want them to move him around. I don't want him to be a dedicated X. I think he could do it. And this is just me. Like, I'm curious what you think. Mm-hmm. I think he could be a dedicated X, but I think you get more out of him if you kind of use him to create mismatches and move him around the formation.
Yeah, I agree with that as well. I also just don't think Josh has had this kind of guy except for like Hogan and Brandon Cooks. So I think that there will be packages where Matt Collins is the X and then you'll have Kyle Williams as your Z. But then if it's like we like Kyle Williams with this matchup, because, think about like Tez Walker, right? Where Drake just knows he's going to win the go ball. He's going to beat the guy off the line of scrimmage. So I think in those kinds of packages, Kyle Williams will be that one-on-one matchup. But in other ones where they want him to be the primary target on easier concepts, then he'll be like the Z, motion him inside, stuff like that.
Brandon Cook's an interesting comp. I don't hate that. Brian, your thoughts on Kyle Williams?
Yeah, I think he's better probably off the line, but with the release package and the lawn speed, like he can hold up on the outside if you need him. Like he ran past Travis Hunter for a touchdown last year. So that ability is definitely there to be able to move him around. And Mike, you mentioned Ladd McConkey. If you go on Mock Draftable, Ladd McConkey's number one comp in terms of like these measurements and the 40 times and all that is Kyle Williams, right? So maybe better a year later there with Kyle Williams. So he's my type of receiver. Excuse me, the separation ability, right? Like they haven't had a guy who can separate naturally downfield like this in years, it seems. So I was a big fan of Kyle Williams there.
So want to listen into our friends at Prize Picks before we keep this going?
Sure. I was going to do it in between 2 and 3, but days 2 and 3. We can do it now.
All right.
Let's do it.
The other thing is, did we see Bill Belichick was on CBS Sunday Morning today?
No.
He was on CBS Sunday Morning in a ripped up Navy sweatshirt to promote his new book. With
Seems
Jordan
like
Hudson.
something he would do.
Jordan Hudson right by his side. At any rate, let's listen into Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the best place to turn your sports knowledge into cash. With millions of members, Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. And all you got to do is pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 2,000 times your cash. So run your game all season long on Prize Picks. And right now, you can cash in on the basketball playoffs. So do not miss your last chance to add your favorite players from the court into your Prize Picks lineups, whether it's points, rebounds, assists, or anything. Make sure to just pick more or less, and you get up to 2,000 times your cash. You think LeBron James will get more than 24 points? Think Giannis will score more than 35? Cook up those hot takes with your friends and win real money this basketball season when you and your crew run your game on Prize Picks. And all you got to do is sign up today, download the app, and use code CLNS. You get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code CLNS and get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game.
All right, let's keep moving. Day 3, the Patriots traded down twice, so the Matthew Judon trade tree got a little expansive, and they end up with center Jared Wilson from Georgia, another guy we talked about quite a bit. I think the reason he fell, because that's the question. All right, you like this pick, but why did he go, if he was the top center in the draft, top true center, which many people projected him as, why did he go as low as he did? This was a pretty experienced offensive line class. A lot of guys that were 2, 3, 4-year starters. Jared Wilson only had 1 year as a starter and didn't really play much before that. So he's pretty raw, but he's a great athlete, showed a lot of, high football IQ, good intelligence. And now they have their center, should be the center of the future. Like maybe Garrett Bradbury starts the season off there, but I would think that will be Jared Wilson's job sooner rather than later. Taylor, when do
you guys lose him?
Yeah, I did too. So I'm just going to go.
Okay,
I'm assuming he was going to ask when I think he's going to contribute.
Barth has officially crashed out of draft weekend. He is
literal crash out. I think it depends on Layden Robinson and Garrett Bradbury are the two big dominoes for me. Because I think that he could be the day one center because Garrett Bradbury, yes, he's the veteran. That's going to give him a leg up. But you've also got Jared Wilson coming from the SEC. He's gone against Bama. He was at Georgia. He's seen some of the kind of pressure packages that trickle up to the NFL. So it's not like necessarily his head's going to be spinning, but he's only been a 1-year starter. So there's that buffer period where we don't really know. I wouldn't be surprised if he's the starter for Garrett Bradbury, but also Ellie Wolf told us that he's going to compete with Layden Robinson, the left guard, as well. And if you look at their physical measurements and their mock draftable profiles, they're not very dissimilar size-wise. Layden's got much longer arms, but then Jared Wilson, while he's got short arms, has like 11-inch hands, which I said it in the show, it's like carrying around 2 cinder blocks with you. Like that's massive, and it's why he has such a great, why he's able to latch on to targets and really control them. So I think his first role would probably be competing at that left guard spot and then maybe being the backup center. But obviously, if he impresses, I could absolutely see him pushing Garrett Bradbury off the roster. And if Layden impresses too, that's another big one. Because if he's so good that you don't want to replace him, then it's like, all right, well, who's the odd man out here? It's the guy on a 2-year deal who can get cut, and we don't really have a ton of financial ramifications.
Yeah, I love this pick a lot. I wasn't the biggest fan of the Garrett Bradbury signing. Like, I got it that you needed a veteran, but he had a tough year for the Vikings last year. So I wanted them to add a center. I thought maybe it would more come like later in the draft and Drew Kendall or Jake Majors from Texas. But the fact that they moved down a couple times and they got the best, depending how you look at Gray Zabel, like they got the best pure center prospect in the draft in Jared Wilson, who's a freak athlete, a big guy too, right? He's not like a smaller David Andrews. Like this is a big guy who can move, hit 21 miles an hour at the combine, which was the fastest among all centers. So I think he could compete right out of the gate, but then, yeah, it's just bonus that he has that versatility to play guard a little bit too, and maybe compete for that spot if Bradbury settles down and you want a veteran at the center spot. So I love that pick a lot. Mike, I know that was your favorite pick of the day too. So
I've outlined it 15 different times. I did it last night with the 3 of us. We'll do it again for the crossover people who have not seen it. But yeah, I love it, and I love the way they did it because, as Brian said, he could have been someone on day one, best pure center in the draft class, and they moved back almost 20 spots from where they were at 77. They recouped a bunch of capital, fell to 95 essentially, and still got a guy who can compete on day one at a center position that is rather barren without David Andrews. And I know Garrett Bradbury's here, but as Brian said too, like Ryan Kelly was basically pulled out of free agency, or did they trade for Ryan Kelly? I don't remember.
The Vikings?
Yeah.
They signed him in free agency.
He was a free agent. Either way, they replaced Garrett Bradbury. So clearly they weren't in love with what he was doing. It's only a 1-year deal. He could come in and prove everyone wrong and kick butt, and then Jared Wilson could compete at the left guard spot, and it's all well and good. But for the way they did it, plus recouping a 4th-round pick next season and a better draft, and the capital in the 5th round, which we'll get to trade up for Joshua Farmer. We'll talk about him in a little bit. I think it was a slam dunk, and I think it really pulled together their day 2 and kind of made it all worth the while. So that's Jared Wilson, and then we can move on to day 3 with Craig Woodson, who this felt like in the draft room video they released that it's kind of seemed like a consensus thing where they show Mike Vrabel. He's like, "We got Craig Woodson, baby. Let's F and go." And the whole place kind of went nuts. So look, we thought, at least at the time, that maybe Ricci, but at this point, Tayler, you mentioned it right off the bat. It's a day 3 pick. I don't want to say a dart throw because it's just outside the top 100, but you go get your guys on day 3, and that's exactly what it seemed like the Patriots did with Craig Woodson. So Tayler, we'll start with you. We'll get your thoughts on the safety from Cal.
Yeah, I still haven't gotten to do my deep dive yet. So I don't have a ton new to add necessarily to the conversation that I didn't mention yesterday with the Syracuse film watch, where it just wasn't one of his best games, where he was targeted a lot against tight ends, led up a few receptions, and was solid in pursuit and as a tackler, but just I didn't think it was anything that popped out or what I was expecting from reading. But from what I read from all the people who've studied him and spent all the time is that this is a guy who's physical. I know that we project him as a center fielder, but when I did kind of go through his highlights, really his best plays were when he was in that robber role and was able to just kind of stick guys. So maybe he's more of like a Devin McCourty, where early downs he is the center fielder, but then when you get to the obvious passing situations, maybe you put Peppers as a center fielder because you don't really love him in man coverage. And we know the Patriots, if they know pass is coming, they're going to want to play that cat. You got that cat, I got this cat. So maybe that's where he can be more of that robber and, be the ball hawk and the physical guy that he's been reported to be. So the biggest thing that I really think we need to talk about with Woodson, though, is communication. He mentioned it, how that was one of his strengths. Ryan Cowden mentioned it multiple times. And we know last year the Patriots secondary just suffered from so many coverage breakdowns, more than I think any of us have seen from a defense, because they were coached by Bill Belichick. And obviously coaching has a lot to do with that, but also having a player who's so used to being that facilitator on the back end. When last year the green dot guy went down, and it just caused so many problems and kind of forced Kyle Duggar to play through an injury as someone who is used to that level of communication. I think having a young guy who can be a long-term answer in that kind of role is a really smart move.
So first off, you guys just blew by Jared Wilson, huh? I didn't think I was gone for that long.
Respectfully, he's a center. So, there's only so much we can.
So as my computer cut out, I was asking you if you thought he could compete for the left guard spot. But I think
so. What the consensus was, from at least this one, was that probably Layden is going to be the first guy that he competes with. But if Layden plays well and then Garrett Bradbury falls behind, it's going to end up being
right.
an odd man out.
I think you have him there if you need him, if none of the other guys step up. But I think ideally you develop him at center. Also leave it to my computer to crap out at the very end of the draft process. That's what happened. So I got a new computer a couple weeks ago because my old one was being weird, but I was still using the old one just for streaming because it's just kind of pain in the ass having to set up my laptop all the time. And it's like, all right, I'll just use this one for this. And it was starting to go. And I'm like, if it just gets me through the draft, then I'll build in a setup. And it came up half an hour short. But
I will say, Alex, you're coming through much clearer now, and
okay.
The screen's better. You're on time. The first part, it was a little shaky, so I think you're better off.
Because the computer was apparently literally dying. Literally, the screen froze, and I thought, all right, the internet's being weird. And then it was it literally said on the screen, functionality error restarting. And then it was factory set.
Are you on the new computer now?
I'm on the new computer now, yeah.
Okay. There we go.
So I had to, but this one isn't totally set up. So I didn't know if it was going to work for this. I haven't used it for this yet. So I'm glad it's working.
Good.
I don't know if everybody went on Craig Woodson yet. I don't know where we're at.
We just started on Woodson. Tayler was the first one to go.
All right. I'll let Brian go then.
Tayler pretty much covered all of it. The big one, I was going to say, and he added on the end, was the communication, right? Woodson mentioned it as a strength of his game. Cowden mentioned it multiple times in one answer. So that's big because there were so many breakdowns last year. But yeah, it looks like he has the versatility to play, split safety, single high, come down in the box, kind of has that robber. So some good versatility to add to that back end. Maybe he can free up Kyle Duggar and Jabril Peppers to play a little more closer to the line of scrimmage on early downs if he can cover back there. And I just keep going again. Like I'm with Tayler. Like I only watched one game of him, so I keep going back to Daniel Jeremiah's answer last week. Like he loved this guy, thinks he could come in and you look up and he's starting football games halfway through his rookie season. So it was the one pick where they kind of broke from consensus, but you can see what they like. And again, it's a day 3 pick, so you're not going to get on them too much there for breaking from consensus.
And did anyone see a national guy that didn't like the pick, by the way? I'm just curious because all of the national guys I saw loved it.
Yeah, I think this might be one where just like the consensus board sometimes will miss a guy or two. Yeah. It's Cal, he's that kind of they're a Power 4 program, but he wasn't exactly starring in the SEC and multi-position guy. So he's not somebody, media members of certain teams are going to look at and be like, all right, I'm in on this guy because he's a fit for me. He doesn't really like kind of stand out one of those roles. There's a couple of these guys every year, I think, that just slip through the consensus, and you really have to be somebody who truly goes through and watches all 300, 400 players to get to him. I like him on the back end. Some of that is just by default of I want Peppers and Duggar in the box because that's where they're better. But I also think that communication is valuable from that position. Mm-hmm. And if that's his best trait, let's put him in a position where he can use that best trait to the best. I don't think he's a full-time deep safety. I don't think he's a Devin McCourty. But I think he's a guy that can play back there on obvious passing downs. You can maybe move him into the slot a little bit too, and he can maybe give you some reps as a big nickel. And then what did he say? Like he loves hitting people, he loves contact, whatever that is.
That's favorite part of the game.
That's usually a sign a guy's going to be a special team stud. So he gives you that as well. So objectively, probably my least favorite pick that they made, but I don't know, would have been like my second or third favorite pick last year. Like it speaks to the strength of their class. They can't all be the best pick on the board. Mm-hmm. But it'll be interesting to see kind of how they find a way to use them. Again, I'm jumping back in here. Did we cover Craig Woodson across the board? Taylor's got something.
There is one more thing, and I've seen this because so last night I asked Elliot about Kobe Minor. And whether he factored into the nickel spot. He actually dropped, and I've been saying that I wasn't sure if they were going to continue to use big nickel because Vrabel typically hasn't. He just had his slot corner, and he stayed on the field whenever they were in nickel. But he said that they are going to continue to have their 3 safety nickel package, which is very different. So to that point, I don't really see Craig Woodson as the guy who's going to be that slot defender. I think that's more Duggar. I think that's more Peppers. Because from what I saw from Woodson, while he can be physical, like if he's got a head of steam, he'll stick you for sure. I just don't think he's the kind of physical presence where I would necessarily want him in the thick of it if I could, have a Duggar or a Pepper there instead of him. So that's why on early downs, I think he'll be on the back end. And then as the passing situation becomes more obvious, then I think he starts playing close to the line of scrimmage.
All right, let's move on to the next 4th round pick. The Patriots, they traded up, right? They traded up from the Shadur pick 144. They took Joshua Farmer, the defensive tackle from Florida State, 6'3", 305, 6'3" or 6'5", 305. Another one of these just athletic, attacking defensive tackles, was more of a run player for the Seminoles. Might have some pass rush upside just based on his athleticism. That's more untapped right now than anything else. That's raw potential, but they needed a run defender. I thought they were going to go out and try to get another nose tackle, somebody to pair with Tonga. This is more their style of run defender, but he is somebody who can play the run. And I think now you have him, Milton Williams, Christian Barmore, assuming he's healthy, and Keon White. These are 4 guys that are highly athletic, that play a very aggressive style, that can play multiple positions on the defensive line. There are a lot of opportunities here, Brian, for Terrell Williams to get creative and come up with some rush games. We know they're not going to blitz a lot, so there's going to be a lot on those 4 guys and obviously everybody else, but feels like they gave themselves some opportunities to get creative with that unit up front.
Yeah, well, you mentioned Terrell Williams. Like, this is the type of interior rusher that I was looking for them to give him, right? Like this toolsy kind of ball of clay that they can mold and hopefully develop. And, the length, the first step explosiveness, he's twitchy, really powerful hands. Like, there's a lot to work with there as a potential pass rusher. And then you mentioned, he can play the run. He maybe needs to become more consistent in some areas, but I really like the Farmer pick. really good value based off, consensus boards. Felt like he could have been someone who went in round 3, back half of day 2. So I like that pick a lot. And if they could get that pass rushing ability out of him, pairing him with Milton Williams and Christian Barmore in that rotation, I think that could be really deadly for opposing offensive lines.
So, I love the fit. I love the bringing in somebody along the defensive line, Alex, as you mentioned, with your Milton Williams and your Christian Barmore. But really what made me love this pick so much, and the rest of, from Kyle Williams through Braden Swinson, who we'll get to, is the way they worked the board and the way and we talked about it with Jared Wilson, but they picked up an extra 5th. And then as Joshua Farmer falls, they say, we're going to get our guy. He's our guy. We're trading up to go get him. So clearly they had conviction in the room, and they went and they made it happen. And I felt the same way with Craig Woodson, where we saw that behind-the-scenes video, and Vrabel was pumped up, and we just talked about this. But it felt like the whole room was like, wow, we got our guy, and then they come up and get another guy, and Joshua Farmer. So with all of the ways people kind of came at their draft last year, as far as they missed the runs on tackles, they missed out on Ladd McConkey, they traded back when they should have traded up, all of that kind of seems like, and again, we don't know because we haven't seen these guys play, but it felt like they've, with Cowden, with Vrabel, with Stretch, and Elliott Wolf kind of all in that mix, it feels like they've kind of came together and figured out a way to make the draft happen the way they want to. So I liked the conviction. I liked the trade back with Wilson. You get your 5th and you go get your guy in Joshua Farmer. So as you said, Brian, it felt like sort of a steal-ish because he was falling, and they went and got a guy. And I like the pick.
Taylor, I think this was another one of these guys that you kind of got on late, right?
No, I actually liked him back at the Senior Bowl, honestly. It's just, it was such a stacked defensive line class. And really, I was only watching the top 100 guys. And I thought he was one, but I just kind of didn't have enough time to do the deep dive I wanted to. That's coming later today. But at the Senior Bowl, he was one of the guys that stood out, where I noticed him in the backfield a couple times. I tweeted he won a one-on-one rep against Gray Zabel when they put them out there, and everybody was around them. So obviously caught a lot of attention there. But what I really love about this, obviously all the physical, we've already talked about what he can bring. He can be a starter for you down the line, which is great considering we don't know what Christian Barmore's long-term situation is going to be. But now at the very least, you might have Joshua Farmer and Milton Williams in the middle of your defense. Hopefully Keon White develops. That's a really nice young nucleus there. But also the person, where this is a guy who was described by Dane Brugler as an alpha, where he really grew into it in his last season, gradually improved at Florida State, was a captain and became a leader. And also Clint McMillan used to work with him. So this is a guy they were familiar with. And I know they mentioned that was part of why they felt comfortable investing in him, despite, I don't know if it's necessarily a slide. It's just there was so much depth. As Elliott Wolf told us during the draft, he mentioned tight end, running back, and defensive line as positions that had a lot of depth. And obviously we saw that in the 5th round with them getting in the mid rounds with them getting 2 absolute steals. So I really like this one from a character perspective as well, but also very obviously because of the talent this guy possesses and the fact he's going to be working with some really talented defensive line coaches that are going to bring the best out of him.
So the Patriots kept adding to their defense front with the next pick, 146. This was early in the 5th round. Now they took Braden Swinson from LSU, another guy that a lot of people expected to go top 100 that obviously fell. And I think he fell in part just because it was a deep edge class and somebody had to fall. All those edge guys weren't going in the top 100. He was among the group that fell, a guy that I think has already kind of progressed technically. And a guy that, like you were saying, you Mike, you give to this defensive coaching staff, and a guy I think that they're in position to maximize.
Yeah, I like it. And Taylor, we talked about Swinson a little with the it felt like the one where they really went off again, we don't want to come at this guy's character. That's not our point. But it was he wasn't necessarily a team captain like the rest of these guys. Your Craig Woodsons, obviously your Will Campbells and things of that nature. He's just a really damn good football player who kind of fell into their lap, in the 5th round here. And so there was the report from Dane Brugler that he sort of clashed with coaches, but when you go and you work with Mike Vrabel, you're going to work out those clashes and you're going to make it happen. So he seemed excited. He told us that Will Campbell is going to be a 10-year vet in this league. So he seemed excited to be here. Was it him or Farmer that said that they're going to turn? It was Farmer who said they're going to turn us into the Patriots of old, right?
Something like that. Yeah, he said meet Barmore and Williams.
Yeah, okay. But no, regardless, I think you needed edge help. When we talked with Brian live from Foxboro on Friday night going into Saturday, he had Swinson pegged as the guy who, they could potentially take at 106. So the fact that they moved back, or not moved back, but kind of let him fall to them at 146. Another one where they just read the board right and were able to get Woodson, Farmer, and then a guy in Swinson at 146 as well. So again, we've talked about it, and we'll talk about it in general, the way this kind of draft came to them and came together. But getting him at 146 felt like a great selection to me.
Taylor.
Yeah. So I know Elliot Wolf mentioned that one of the reasons he was so comfortable taking Swinson was he went to LSU, the practice that Will Campbell told us about, and he saw Swinson practice, and he was aware of the question marks surrounding his character, watched him practice, and was like, yeah, I'm cool with it. And honestly, I think you can see some of that on both sides. So when I watched some of the tape, I noticed that there were some games where I think it was against Arkansas. He was getting held every play, and they weren't really calling it. And there were some where he stops and he looks for the flag, and you're like, dude, play the play, right? Like, you can still affect the game. You can't be looking for a ref to help you out, because obviously that's just, you need to play through the whistle. But at the same time, this is a guy who will chase down plays, who plays with a ton of energy, clearly cares when he's out there. And I can see how in practice, he's probably one of those guys where he's just talking, he's getting in people's ears, but it's a different kind of energy, right? And again, like Vrabel said, you don't win with just a bunch of good dudes. Doesn't mean he's a bad dude, but sometimes you want somebody with an edge. He's not going to be a captain for you, but he's going to be a tone setter. And I think Braden Swinson is someone who I think initially is going to be a situational edge rusher. He could even push fellow former LSU Tiger Caleb Von Chason off the roster, because I really do think he's pretty day one ready made to be an effective rusher. And I think he can develop into an every down player, because the pop he has in his hands is significant. He can set an edge. You really want him more against tight ends. But as a pursuit player, as an edge setter against maybe some more skill player guys, he's pretty fierce. So I like what he brings as a rusher. He definitely needs to be coached up, but an absolute steal, and brings juice to a new look line that is going to be significantly better getting after the passer than they've been in the past couple seasons.
Brian?
I mean, the Farmer and Swinson pick, you mentioned the consensus boards. It felt like something the Eagles would do, where you're like, how the hell did they get away with this, right? And not saying the media knows everything, because the draft is so unpredictable, but the Eagles, the Ravens, a lot of their draft picks kind of follow consensus boards. And then we look 3 years later and they're really good at this draft thing. And that's what they did. You have these two guys who fall in value, and then you pick them. So I loved Swinson, especially. This was one of my underrated guys in this edge group, probably because it was so deep going into the draft. Can improve in the run game, but as Taylor said, he is very powerful. So you can see that potential to grow in that role, but he can come in and provide definite pass rush juice, which this team needs. 60 pressures last year, was 6 in the FBS. He had a 22% pass rush win rate, which was top 15 in the FBS. So there's a lot to work with there as a pass rusher. So I was a big fan of this pick.
I know some people thought wanted them to take a pass rush earlier, looked at it as a top 100 need. I wouldn't have been upset if they did, but we talked about this a lot. They weren't going to address every need they had this offseason. And I don't mind them waiting on edge. Do they have the best group in the league? No. Do they have guys that will be serviceable and get them through the year? Harold Landry, Caleb Von Chason, they had Swinson. They bring some guys back. Anthony Jennings. Yeah, they're fine. It'll be one of their bigger needs next year. I don't think Swinson's a linchpin pass rusher. Do I think he's a guy that, when put into the right system, can contribute and help the football team? Sure. 5-6 sack guy, and just kind of turns up the heat a little bit on passing downs. I think he can be that, and that's a good get. All right, this is where it started to get. Now we're a few hours into day 3. They're trading back. I'm losing track of what pick it is. I'm losing track of what time it is on the clock. I'm losing track of exactly where I am, what's going on. This is when it all got fever dreamy. Round 6, pick 182. Kicker, Andres Borregales. I've been calling him Andy because he said that he likes to go by Andy. But I still see a lot of people.
Thank you for that, by the way. I adjusted during the presser. You said that.
So automatic Andy, as the U called him.
Let's go. I like that.
Jeremy Springer stressed consistency during his pre-draft press conference. Borregales, 4-year starter, the most consistent kicker in the draft. Didn't have the highest highs. Certainly didn't have the lowest lows, though. He was steady Eddie, steady Andy throughout his career. Still has a big leg. The one question is going to be, can he kick in the cold? It's obviously not something we're going to get answered until it's time to answer it. There will be, it sounds like, a competition in camp between him and John Parker Romo. I like him in that competition, but that is going to be a factor that we don't know. But the guy's consistent, and I love his attitude. He was asked about kicking the cold, and he said, I get it. I get the question, but I'm ready to prove people wrong. And he could have downplayed it. He could have said it's no different. It is different, and I'm glad he acknowledged that it's different, but I think he has the right mindset to attack it. He's also an Adam Vinatieri truther. Called him a legend, said he's looked up to him his whole life. Taylor, we're just going in the order, so you get to lead us off on the kicker here, buddy. Your thoughts on Andres Borregales?
Well, I will say, getting to speak to him briefly during the press conference, he does seem like the kind of cool, calm, collected guy. And I asked him, as a kicker, it's a very mental job. How do you kind of go about that? He said he had the one shot, one kill mentality.
Yeah.
Which is like, bet, all right, he's going to fit right into the cartel. Like, Jeremy Springer is going to like this guy. But really, there's a certain level of, like, you have to just be unbotherable as a kicker. And you kind of felt that when he was answering the question, that it's like, yeah, like Gostkowski had that. Whenever you asked him about a miss, he didn't really seem very bothered by it. He's like, yeah, I got to do better next week. And it wasn't like he was upset or in his feels. He was just like, yeah, I'm a professional. I'm going to move on. And I got that vibe. Also, the fact that Alonzo Highsmith knows this guy. He mentioned that they're very close. I think they're still in contact. So he knows the mental makeup of this kid. And again, kicker is like a golfer. Like, you only get a few opportunities. You need to be a steel cage. And the fact that Highsmith is comfortable with him as someone who's been around a ton of football, that gives me a different level of confidence. And the first time I'm actually excited about a kicker for the Patriots in a little bit.
Brian?
Yeah, I don't love drafting kickers because evaluating it is such a crapshoot. But he was the best kicker in the draft. He wears a damn shooting sleeve. Come on now, that's awesome. And Jeremy Springer spent a lot of time with him in the pre-draft process. And you heard even Ryan Cowden talk about that mental makeup. So they definitely like the attitude. And another thing, kind of quiet, underrated, but this new kickoff rule, right? Teams are going to have to cover. I saw a 1-minute clip of the Miami head coach last year talking about this guy, and he said his mentality is like a linebacker. He loves to get down there on these kickoffs and hit people and cover and make tackles. So that's kind of just, obviously the important thing is making your kicks, right? But that's just kind of another element of his game that he could bring with this new kickoff, because they're going to be covering a lot of kicks this year, most likely.
I'll say this too, just to the point of where he was taken. I get, after Chad Ryland, why Patriots fans might be uncomfortable. Chad Ryland was drafted 112th overall. Borregales was 182nd. And I honestly think, more importantly than the overall selection, because there were just better kickers in that draft. Borregales was the first kicker taken. The Patriots kicked off the run. Tyler Loop went next. The Patriots took Ryland, I think, as high as they did, because Jake Moody went in the 90s to the 49ers, and they were trying to react.
Right.
But so more importantly than that, Chad Ryland was the Patriots' 5th pick that season. Borregales was the Patriots' 8th, 7th, 8th, 1, 2, 3, 4,
7,
5,
8,
6, 7, 8th. Yeah. So it's not the same investment.
Not as egregious.
No. Mike, your thoughts on Borregales?
Yeah. I mean, they needed a kicker. We know that. And so on one hand, I'm okay with it because, as Alex, you said, it wasn't as reachy as your Rohrwassers or your Chad Rylands here. And so it's fine. I on one hand, I would rather them try and fill other holes instead of a kicker and just kind of go through the undrafted free agent process or what have you. But at the same time, you mentioned the work that they've done with them and Jeremy Springer and Taylor. You mentioned too that they don't really factor in the warm weather versus the cold weather kickers. And it's like, if you can kick, you can kick. If you can't, you can't. They think he can kick. He has the mental makeup for it. So, I mean, if it works out, it works out. It doesn't, we'll look back on it and rip the pick. But I mean, for now, they needed a kicker because they got rid of, Joey Sly. And so this is kind of what you had to do. And so maybe it's a little early, but you filled other needs before that. It's not like you left a glaring hole and went and got a kicker. So it's fine. It's a dart throw on day 3.
Another long wait, and then we get to pick 220 now into the 7th round. This one was interesting. Marcus Bryant for Missouri. We spent all this time talking about who, Missouri's right tackle, and are the Patriots going to take him in the 1st round? They take Missouri's left tackle in the last round. And there was a question I got. All right, if Membu's so good, why didn't Missouri move him to left? Who do they have over there? The answer was Marcus Bryant. big guy, big imposing frame. I don't actually have his exact measurables up in front of me. I don't know if one of you guys do.
I got it.
6'7", 320, 34 5/8 arms, 83 and 1/8 inch wingspan. So he hits
So
all the
this guy's
thresholds.
he's big, imposing, athletic, very athletic. And we all know RAS score isn't the be all end all, right?
Mm-hmm.
For those who don't know RAS score, it's kind of a score given. How would you describe it?
It's basically comparing one player's measurables to other players at their positions, but also it factors in like the height, weight. It's a little bit more accurate than just like mock draftable, where it's every player at that position. It also factors in other things.
So it's height, weight, combine testing. So Marcus Bryant's top RIS comparisons are Joe Thomas and Jonathan Ogden.
No pressure.
Elite physical makeup. Now, there's a lot more to it. One thing you notice, he's high hipped. He's up there, and that makes it tough for him to get leverage. He's also, again, he's athletically quick. His reactions need to be quicker. He's a little slow to react to what's happening in front of him. But this is a guy that has played left tackle extensively, has 500 right tackle snaps under his belt, mostly from his time at SMU. I think with his athleticism, with that experience, this is a guy that can be a swing tackle. I think ideally, like in a perfect world, he becomes your long-term starting right tackle. That I'm not expecting that. That would be like the peak. But I think he's a guy that can be a legitimate backup on the left and right side, where you maybe don't want him playing all 17 games. But if he has to start 2 or 3 games here or there, he can do that, and he can do it at both spots. So you only have to carry 3 tackles instead of 4, Brian.
Yeah, I mean, he's got all the traits you kind of look for in a late round developmental tackle. Now, you mentioned he plays a little bit upright, like the bend isn't always there, but we imagine they're going to get back to more of that downhill gap runs. Like he's got the power to succeed there. So yeah, for a late round, 220 the pick was a dart throw at tackle. Like pick the guy who's big. He's got all the measurements. He can move a little bit. Like those are the traits you're kind of looking for there.
Mike.
And yeah, on that, I know you said right tackle, but what if this turns into somebody who just can be your left tackle, and then Will Campbell kicks into guard, and then you have, and the reason being, I don't want Will Campbell to be their long-term left guard. I want him to be their long-term left tackle. That is obviously the ultimate goal here. But for whatever reason, if it doesn't work, compiled with Marcus Bryant's pretty good. It can play left tackle in this league, and that's the left side of your line for years to come. Not because he has to go out there because Campbell can't play the left, but he can go out there and play left, so you're able to move Will Campbell inside. That's obviously peak. I don't necessarily see that happening. It is the 220th pick. He went 220 for a reason. But the height, weight, the RAS score, his ability to, again, he held down the left side. He was the bookend to Armand Membu, who was one of the best tackles in the class. So it's worth it at 220. I have a hard time ripping late picks. I probably will on the next one. We'll get to it in a second. But no, I'm good with it. You needed depth at the position, and he can, you can reuse him and potentially round out the rest of the tackle room.
Taylor.
Yeah, so my only exposure to his tape was watching Donovan Ezeraku, actually. I was hoping to see Ezeraku against Membu, and almost the entire game he was up against Marcus Bryant. And I'm like, all right, I don't know this guy, so Ezeraku's probably going to smoke him. Ezeraku had a pressure and a sack. That was the only thing he did. I left watching that game not liking Ezeraku as much as I did from the Senior Bowl and for everything people said about him. Obviously, Ezeraku has all the tools, like being in the NFL, and with good coaching, he's going to be a fine player. But the fact that Bryant was able to have as much success as he was and really dominate that matchup stood out to me. And I posted the clip, but I think a swing tackle probably would be more ideal with his size. He's more of a prototypical Patriots right tackle. But from the reports I read, no one talked about a position switch. So the fact that he really can be the left, and I think he's a pro-ready kind of pass blocker. Maybe not right now, but he's got the tools to be one. And I know he's got some work to do as a run blocker. But with that length and that size, if his technique is on point, he can be one of those kinds of tackles who just doesn't take the bait because he knows what his skill set is. And he knows, I'm a really wide dude. I'm going to protect my inside. If you fake, I'm not going to bite on it. And then we're going to take it from there. So I like the pick. I think we talked about the double dip potential of Will Campbell, and then like either a guard or tackle guy who takes up a lot of space. So I really like that kind of combination. Exactly what I think a lot of us were hoping they would do.
All right, let's hear from our friends at Game Time, and then we'll get to a couple more picks and some other stuff.
Patriots Daily is powered by Game Time, the best place to get last-minute tickets to your favorite events. And with the NBA playoffs officially here, we all know it's better to go see games in person. So make sure you use the Game Time app to get to your favorite team's games today. They have last-minute deals with killer prices. You also get the all-in pricing feature, views from your seat, the lowest price guaranteed, and so much more. And Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying NBA playoff tickets. I'm heading in to Boston this week to watch them take on the Magic, and I use the Game Time app because it is the best place, my favorite place, to get tickets to your favorite games with their last-minute deals. You can save up to 60% off by buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code CLNS for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed.
All right, Patriots come back on the board. So then we had this wait, right? They were supposed to pick at 228 after 220. They trade back. They get 2 picks in the 250s, which, again, you can't criticize me and Brian for doing that in our mock drafts. But the first one, Julian Ashby, long snapper from Vanderbilt. Lance Zierlein called him the best long snapper in the draft. Obviously, an experienced guy has held that position for a long time at Vandy. What does this mean for Joe Cardona? So I had talked about this. I even got Felger to talk about it a little bit.
Wow.
Well,
That's really impressive.
talking about it in the sense that he was making fun of me for talking about it, but he acknowledged it.
We assumed.
They usually keep a second long snapper around. And it had been Tucker Addington for a long time, but he's now in Houston. So I thought they were at least going to sign a UDFA to kind of have somebody around. The report was that, and Elliot Wolf said it, they didn't think Ashby was going to get to the UDFA market, that he was going to get drafted, or that they wouldn't have been able to win the bid for him had he hit it. So that to me means a little more than just, hey, this is a guy we're going to keep around on the practice squad just in case Joe Cardona gets hurt. Is this, does the final captain domino from 2024 fall? The last Patriot with a Super Bowl ring in New England currently on the roster. Is he on his way out, Brian? Or was it Mike? Whose turn was that? I think it was Mike.
Brian, go ahead.
They got rid of every other captain. So he's 33 years old, Joe Cardona, and they just use a draft pick on this guy. So I could definitely see it. And, you know, if you look at Ashby, like I pulled up his RAS, like he has elite speed grades. He had a perfect 10-yard split, 1.56. So this guy's athletic. He can get down the field. And we know that was a change in Jeremy Sprainer's scheme last year. Like they let the lawn snapper attack and go down and cover. And we saw Joe Cardona make some plays early in the year, but then, you know, we didn't hear much of him. So maybe they are looking to get younger and get a little bit more athletic in that lawn snapper to help in some of those punt coverage situations. So that, you know, the fact that they are using a pick on a lawn snapper would tell me they're not sold on Joe Cardona.
I saw somebody point out he's a better 10-yard split than Roma Dunze did.
Yeah. We talked about that yesterday on the show. Yeah. He better, and no offense to Joe Cardona, but he better beat out Joe Cardona for the long snapper position because they spent a freaking draft pick on a long snapper. So, like, if they take him at 251 and you either cut him and don't bring him back and essentially throw the 251st pick away, you either keep 2 long snappers at that point on your roster. Exactly. I'm not doing that. So I don't want Joe Cardona out of here, but at the same time, when you spend a draft pick on a long snapper, he better be your future at long snapper. So if he's not, I'll flame the pick. Apparently, according to Mike Garafolo from NFL Network, there was supposedly going to be a bidding war for Julian Ashby's services if he did end up as a UDFA. So the Patriots at least skip out on that and just take him at 251. So it's fine, I guess. I don't love taking a long snapper. I don't love drafting a purely long snapper, but it's a relatively valuable position, at least on special teams. So after filling the holes they did, it's the same with the kicker pick. It's okay. But he better be a long-term long snapper, that's for sure.
I'm just ready, Barth. We're going to be on the hill. And not only are we going to have to judge the kickers, now we're going to have to see who is snapping to the kickers. Where is the ball placement on these field goals?
I'll be the
Well,
same.
Yeah, like
so for punts, the bigger one is like how fast can you get it back on the punt? Because you got to cover more ground. 0.7 seconds is what you're looking for. So we're gonna be like really stop watching the snaps on the punts. It's gonna be me, you and Mike Reese are gonna have some fun. Taylor, your thoughts on Ashby?
Well, one, I don't think anybody can complain that he was drafted, because when's the last time you heard somebody complain that Cardona was drafted?
Right.
A lot of
When
people
was
the
he
year he got
drafted?
drafted know which sense.
You remember
well,
when he was drafted?
he's got to make the team and be like a 10-year pro.
Right.
And,
Of course.
Cardona, I don't remember the exact pick, Taylor, but I know he's a 5th round pick because Bill used to only use the 5th round for specialists.
Right. So, like, he's a 5th round pick. I think the 7th round, you take whatever you want. And if they did think it was a bidding war, like, another part of it is that unrestricted free agency, or undrafted free agency, that's really the preference for most players, because you can actually negotiate your contract. So, like, a 7th round pick is literally a flyer. So I'm fine with it. Brian, like you mentioned, the first thing that popped into my head was, oh, this guy could probably get downfield and tackle, because Joe Cardona like led his position in tackles for a minute there. So I'm not going to act like I have deep thoughts on this pick, but he seemed like a great kid. I'm excited to meet him and see what he's about. But long snapper is still an important position. It's one of those like regular snapper where you don't really think about it. You don't need it until you don't have one, and then it's screwing up your punt operation, messing up field position. So I don't mind spending capital on something that is very important, even though it doesn't get a lot of praise. And it's a 7th rounder. I don't really care as long as he makes the team. If he doesn't, then you look a little bit silly. But either way, I don't think I'm going to care too.
Cardona was the 166th pick, 5th round in 2015.
166.
Yeah,
that's so Bill, man.
So
that's
awesome. that's closer to where they took Braden Swinson than it is to where they took Julian Ashby. Final pick, literally the final pick, Mr. Irrelevant, the 3rd Mr. Relevant in Patriots history. Marty Moore, by the way, who was their Mr. Relevant pick in 1994, linebacker, was the first ever Mr. Relevant to play in a Super Bowl. So there is some Mr. Relevant history in New England. The latest player to join that is Kobe Minor, the cornerback from Memphis, multi-time transfer, also played at Texas Tech and Indiana. Inside, outside, corner. Honestly, there's one guy every year that's like not even on my radar. Ashby was, because I looked at the top long snappers. This was the one guy that just kind of came out of nowhere. But plus athlete, you figure he's going to play on special teams, and then the cornerback depth is kind of up in the air. They have guys. They definitely have guys who you think can do it. It's just a matter of who wins. So he'll go right in that mix with Alex Austin and Isaiah Bolden and Marcellus Dial. And like, I think he'll be right in the mix there to win a depth job as a corner, but he's probably going to have to make the roster mainly on special teams, Taylor.
Yeah, I mean, and he fits the mold for what Mike Vrabel likes in his nickels, so it does make a lot of sense. And Elliot Wolf mentioned Marcellus Dial and Isaiah Bolden, so it was kind of nice to hear their names. I wasn't really sure how this new regime would feel about them, but really the slot corner position, they haven't touched. So maybe they're fine with Marcus Jones and this is more competition. But Kobe Minor, one thing, it's hard to find any information on him. I found some clips. One, he had a good game against Marvin Harrison Jr. apparently in 2023. I got to look back at that tape when he was at Indiana. But there's that. He also had a strip sack I saw where he was unblocked on a simulated pressure. Mike Vrabel told us at the combine, it's not about the blitz. It's not about the blitz. It's about the blitzer. And he looks like a big hitter. Now, he did celebrate with the ball on the ground and didn't seem to realize that the play was still going. Got to work on that. But yeah, it seems like he's got really good ball skills and people like his coverage ability. So I'm excited to see what he can do in camp. And if anybody has some tape out there that I can watch on this guy, please send it to me. I can't find it.
There's got to be Indiana tape of him, right?
That's the one I'm going to watch. Yeah, but I'm not sure if he was a starter or anything because he doesn't play all the snaps.
I think he played a good amount in Indiana.
He was I saw he was honorable mention like all Big Ten from coaches in 2023. So there's something, I guess. But yeah, Elliot kind of mentioned it, like he transferred multiple times and then he was hurt. So you get why he flies under the radar. Even Daniel Jeremiah on the broadcast, maybe he was just trying to get out of there with the last pick, but he's like, I have no idea who this guy is.
They broke Jeremiah.
Yeah, seriously. So yeah, we'll see how he just kind of factors into that cornerback room, and then you assume he's gonna have to play a lot on special teams to kind of crack this roster.
What do you want? I'm like Daniel Jeremiah here. Kobe Minor, great. I'll take it. Mr. Relevant's fun. I mean,
I'm going to call him Kobe Bryant so many times.
I think somebody
I did.
right?
It was you, right?
I honestly didn't. I was like, I'm sorry, it's been a long weekend. He was cool about it, but
they both spell their name like Kobe with 2 E's, and then it's just Kobe.
Yeah.
Like it's.
I didn't even notice I made a mistake until he said it.
All right, so that.
Yeah.
Or sorry, Mike. Do you have any other thoughts?
No.
All right, so that's the draft class, and then we are not done. And then, so every year I put out my list of like, here's the UDFAs I want. And it's like a total pie in the sky wish list that's not going to happen. And I end up getting disappointed. This is the year I didn't put out the list. I didn't need to. The Patriots did it themselves. I mean, come on with some of these guys they got. Efton Chisholm, Lamb Larison, both tight ends.
Yeah.
They got 2 guys who are starting caliber tight ends. CJ Dupree, a lot of people thought would get drafted. They didn't quite do as much on the defensive side of the ball. It's mostly offense. But Tayler, your favorite from there, and I think I know who it is, but your favorite from their UDFA class.
Lan Larison.
Oh, okay.
I've seen him catch that ball. Oh my God. He actually gives me like if Danny Woodhead ate like the Mario mushroom. Because he's got he's a guy who dominated a lower level of competition, just like Shadron State, Danny Woodhead, like won the award for the best player in his division of college football. And it's just like he looks, obviously it's not the best athletes in the world, but he moves at a completely different speed. Like he's running away from people consistently. Crazy catches on his tape. Like for a receiver, they'd be nuts. He's making like one-handed grabs, like passes over his head, throws behind him, he's snagging, and then catching in stride and stiff-arming people. If Antonio Gibson doesn't make this team, it's going to be because Lan Larison made it impossible for them to cut him. There's like 4 guys, at least, I think, that can make this Patriots team in their undrafted free agent class. Lan Larison is at the top of that list because I don't think there's enough people on this team right now who have the level of playmaking ability that he has. And he seems super interesting. Like he's a bull rider, and his parents apparently told him that you can't play football forever. You can ride bulls forever, which is insane, by the way. My dad did that when he was a kid.
Really,
right. I'm like, can you ride bulls forever? But yeah, super interesting guy. I can't wait to talk to him. But I mean, he has a 10-minute highlight tape. So just for an idea of how crazy talented this guy is, and it's not, a bunch of fluff. I was watching the entire time waiting for it to kind of cool down, and it never did.
Look, here's the thing with the FCS guys, right? And people will be like, oh, well, he put up those numbers at a lower level. Like he dominated, but it's a lower level. First of all, he led the FCS in all-purpose yards last year. So it's not like he was one of the best. No, nobody had more yards last year than Lan Larison. And when you talk about the lower level guys, we dominated the lower level, but he dominated. He was too good for that level of competition. Does that mean he's good enough for the NFL? I don't know. But it definitely means that he's better than an FCS player should be. So that's Lan Larison. Brian, your favorite.
I'm an Efton Chisholm guy. I love him.
There we go.
He had a
really
really productive, really last couple years at Eastern Washington. He broke Cooper Kupp's program record, having a catch in 53 straight games. Like this dude can run some routes. Go watch him in the Shrine Bowl. Like he came out of nowhere and just tore up some of those guys at the East-West game earlier in the pre-draft process. He's tough. He's physical across the middle. Like this is a Josh McDaniels slot receiver to the T. You knew Josh was going to try to get this guy on the roster. So I like Chisholm a lot, and I would not be surprised at all if he makes a serious push to make this 53.
Mike,
I said last night real quick on that one because I didn't mention Chisholm. I didn't want to take multiple guys. I would not be surprised if he pushes seriously pop for a roster spot, only because of the reliability.
For a roster spot or depth chart spot?
Or if there's like a tight squeeze and this new regime is like, we want our guys, just because like, what have we talked about with Pop? It's the consistency, it's the zone stuff, it's kind of the mental side of the game. And that's Josh McDaniels' game to a T. And Efton Chisholm literally looks like a factory-made Josh McDaniels receiver. Everybody knows I love Pop. It's nothing against the player, person, anything like that. But this is a new regime, and just given where he struggles and where Efton Chisholm is very good, I just think that Chisholm is a guy where you don't really worry about him being on the field every single snap.
Yeah, he might take his depth chart spot. They're not the rookies. The rookies from last year should be more worried than Pop.
I mean,
I'm cutting Baker and Polk.
Different roles.
Pop, but Pop also is their returner.
True.
And I don't think Efton. I don't think
so many guys that could be the returner. Like
it's not Chisholm. If anything, Larison. If any of these guys are going to be the returner, it's Larison because you need the one thing Chifton doesn't have is that top end speed.
Mm-hmm. But it's like he's so quick. It's the Edelman thing where he beats you off the line so fast it doesn't matter. Like that's like in the Shrine Bowl, he's beating guys by yards because he smoked them off the line. So
the 3-cone. He didn't get an invite to the combine, but the 3-cone would have been like the 4th best among all receivers, and that was always the drill that we looked at. Be like, that's a Patriot receiver because it was a really good 3-cone. So he definitely is in that mold.
Mike, your favorite Patriots UDFA?
The fullback's back. Brock Lampy. NIU. We'll take it. There's a couple of highlights on the backfield from him too. So he's not just the ground and pound hole clearer, if you will. He can also catch the ball in the backfield a little bit, and maybe he gets some James Devlin carries at the goal line. So he's the one true fullback now on the roster because Giovanni Ricci is kind of a tight end hybrid. I know that they've kind of tried it with a couple of these other guys on the roster now, but instead of taking Watson out of Florida and making him your fullback, they go with Brock Lampy. So another one who, if they like what they see and they want to actually keep a true fullback, maybe he has a chance to make the roster. But no, it's fun because we know Josh loves his fullbacks.
They invited fullbacks now.
Yeah.
They invited to minicamp, but Lampy is. Okay. Lampy's the guy. Like Lampy, you talk about Chisholm being a Josh McDaniels slot receiver. Lampy's a Josh McDaniels fullback, 6'1", 260, ton of power behind him. He's the most likely to make the team for me, just because there's no competition.
Yeah, right.
He's the only. Well, I guess there's the guy that's in rookie minicamp. But like
Jaheim Bell.
Jaheim Bell, that's a completely different kind of player. Jaheim Bell's not coming into the B gap and taking on.
Like if he's gonna play,
40-pound linebacker,
probably in that role. And I'm just saying, like
and what happens when Jaheim Bell meets 250-pound linebacker in the B gap? Right.
That's my point. Like, I'm just saying. I was joking. I don't think it's gonna be close.
No, I think they could keep Bell, but he's going to be an H-back. Like he's not. Brock Lampy's putting his hand in the dirt in the I formation and trying to crack somebody's skull after the ball is snapped.
Yep.
And Hunter Henry's going to be the guy in motion.
Right, exactly. So, and then we did the tight ends. They need a third project tight end. CJ Dupree is a guy a lot of people thought would get drafted, is primarily a blocking tight end, which they need, but has some athleticism. So maybe there's some receiving upside there. And then G. Scott is like a super untapped. He really didn't play at Ohio State. But
Ohio State guy too, yeah.
He was a great athlete.
He was a 4-star wide receiver prospect.
Yeah.
And then he transitioned to tight end, and you look at the stats, and like he's not overly productive, but you're like, okay, they have Jeremiah Smith and Marvin Harrison Jr. and Emeka Ibuka and Jackson Smith and the Jig, but like they're going to throw the ball to those guys. So there's definitely some untapped potential there, maybe as a pass catching tight end.
As a UDFA, that's the kind of guy you bring in and let's see what's here, right? Let's see what's here. Let's see what this guy can do. And he's maybe somebody to stick on the practice squad for a year and really develop. But Lampy has a really good shot at making this team. Chisholm has a really good shot at making this team. Larison, I think if your backfield is, because McDaniels usually likes to keep 4 backs. Ramondre, Henderson, Gibson, Larison, that is such a Josh McDaniels group.
Yeah, it is.
Because Stevenson's your early down guy, Henderson's passing down guy, and then Gibson and Larison are depth for both spots, and you're going to pick and choose. And I also think Larison's going to be a hell of a special teams player. You compared him to Rex Burkhead earlier. It's not a bad or no. Who did you compare to Rex Burkhead?
I think honestly that Burkhead Woodhead mold where they really can do anything.
Well, I got another one. I have another one for Larison. Brandon Bolden.
I like that
because he runs with a little more physicality than some of those guys do. So can Larison be Brandon Bolden where he's going to mix in as like your third back and give whoever you need a spell and also be a key special teams player? They can all make the team. And then one of those tight ends, probably Dupree, just because he's more polished. We didn't even get into the linemen. Jack Conley from Boston College is going to have a chance to compete for depth guard spot. It's one of the better groups. Give me one defensive guy you're interested in. Anybody interested in the Frenchman?
Oh, not
no. Taylor, who's your guy?
Elijah. Oh, sorry.
Go Taylor.
Elijah Ponder, the edge rusher. I didn't even see that they signed him last. Yeah, he's like one of the more souped up guys. I was kind of excited about that. He was one when I was doing mock drafts. I'd sometimes take him in like the 7th, but he's another guy who's got some juice off the edge. So he was the name that really stood out to me on the defensive side.
Brian?
I got to take a minicamp invite. Hector
Right.
Johnson, come on, from Endicott. Let's go.
Give us the boots on the ground scouting report there, Brian.
The goals get some representation. I texted. I have a friend who played at Curry, and I guess he played against them early or at some point. So I texted him for the scouting report. I haven't heard back yet though, so I will update the people. But he was, I think he left. He was a 2-time like MVP all conference, and he left second in sacks. So looks more in the pass rushing mold there and the defensive line.
He was over a sack per game player 2 years ago, and he didn't quite match that the last 2 years, but I think 24 and a half sacks in 44 games at Endicott. Mike, any of the
defensive player of the year and defensive lineman of the year for Worcester.
Hey,
Mike.
Almost not. Sorry, he's from Endicott. Sorry, he's from Worcester.
Mike.
Wilfred Penny from Virginia Tech, all name team candidate for Zach Cox, former tight end as well. 3.5 sacks last year. So again, maybe some sneaky depth along the defensive line can help out that room, especially with Barmore in question.
First of all, Penne, Mike's French.
Oh,
Wilfred Penne.
Okay.
From Tours, France, 6'3", 285, former tight end too, wrestling background, and a pretty good athlete. So there's something interesting there. All right, as we wrap it up here, because we're already at an hour 20, but this is usually our longest show of the year. Biggest storyline you're looking at going into spring practices now that the roster for the most part is set. And I'll add a note on those UDFAs. We don't know. They reportedly signed more than 10. Some of them, Brian mentioned the kid from Endicott, are just signed on minicamp tryouts and aren't fully on the 90. But I don't think we know the full split on that. But the roster set here. Spring practices beginning soon. Tayler, the biggest story you are watching for heading into the spring?
I'm going to be curious to see how left guard and center look. Now, obviously, they're probably going to give some deference to veterans, but at left guard, I don't know who they're going to give the kind of nod to, because Layden finished the year at left guard. Cole's the older guy and has played left guard, but I don't think that he ever really showed the upside that Layden did there. And you've got City. Exactly. Like, you've got guys from every year pretty much, or each of the past 3 years that have been drafted, and you have Jared Wilson. So it's going to be really interesting to see where that trickles out. Obviously, Bradbury is going to be the top center early on, so that's probably not a storyline. But yeah, I'll go with left guard, how exactly they see that rotation working out to start.
Brian.
This wide receiver room has 13 players in it right now. And, we're just talking about Efton Chisholm is someone who could make a push. Like, if Efton Chisholm makes a push, you're looking at Kendrick Bourne, Kayshawn Boutte, Jalen Polk, and Javon Baker could all play elsewhere next season. So what is the hierarchy going to be here? Is Stephon Diggs healthy? Elliot Wolf said he's probably going to be limited, as you would expect, coming off that ACL tear. So just watching how they view this wide receiver room is fascinating. And do they trade some of these guys? Who's going to be catching footballs from Joe Milton in Cowboys training camp? Because the Cowboys' number 2 receiver is like Jalen Tolbert right now. So eventually, half of this wide receiver room is going to have to go. And, just seeing how that plays out is really interesting.
Mike.
Yeah, it's too bad that Brian got to go ahead of me, because wide receiver was my answer. There's, like you said, there's so many guys, and there's so many new bodies mixed with older, mixed with second-year guys who have some to prove. And, do they keep Jalen Polk? Do they give him another chance? Do they not? Is he a trade candidate, like you said, Brian? We'll see what happens there. But I think with Stephon Diggs now in the mix, although he probably won't be participating this spring, you kind of got to earmark him as someone who obviously makes the team. But then, what does Kyle Williams do? Does he impress early? It's fascinating because of Drake May and everything you're putting around him now. It's exciting, but, hopefully it all works out, because that is sort of with what they've done on offensive line, I feel like this is the true last piece trying to put things together, and that wide receiver room could take him over the edge to hopefully really compete this year.
So I'm going to go with kind of off Brian's, but I'm going to take a little bigger picture. Also, Mike had gone first. Brian would have said the kickers, so I wouldn't felt bad about leaving them off. But how much kicker stuff did they do? I don't think they really kicked last spring. That's more a summer thing. So we will get to the kicker battle. But
and long snapper.
Well, maybe might get some punts. Sometimes they do punts in the spring. So for me, just kind of to put what Tayler said and what Brian said and to put it all together, when the offseason started, there were people, and I think some of them were being facetious, but we take everything seriously on the show, talking about, they need to have 40 new players on the roster. We're talking about the 90-man roster, right? 40, 45 new players on the roster. And I was kind of being the wet blanket that was saying, hey, like, that's not realistic. A large roster turnover in the NFL, typically 40 to 45% is a lot and I'm talking 53 to 53, week 18 to week 1. Obviously, we still have a ways to go before we get the Patriots' initial 53-man roster, but hand up, I shouldn't have said what I said. I was wrong. I think there's a good chance I was wrong. They have started taking a hatchet to this thing, and I think it's only going to continue. And the roster is going to look significantly different than it did in week 18. As you kind of alluded to, Brian, the entire wide receiver room could look different. The running back room is going to, they'll still have 2 of the same guys they had last year, but those roles are going to change. The defensive front is entirely overhauled. Safety could look very different. It's not going to be as far as the jokes people were making, which were keep Drake and Christian Gonzalez and send everybody else out. It might be closer to that than me telling everybody to calm down, honestly. So, that's my big takeaway.
It feels like this is just going to be the most competitive camp that I've covered for sure, but that they've had in a long time. Because it's really only like a few positions where there's not so much depth where you're like, I can see someone like a surprise guy making the roster. It's really all over the place, except for quarterback.
The thing is, so this is kind of my point, though. Is it going to be competitive? Is it in the sense that, are we really going to have these grinded out competitions, or is this coaching staff going to look at some of the guys who were here in the past and say, no, it's the new guy's turn, right? And just put them to the side.
Well, I don't think you want to, like, this is one reason I think that it's one reason I think that like Jelani Tavai's on the board, like to a degree, I don't think you want to just completely exile your roster because you want there to be that competition. And I think you want for your new guys to beat out the guys of the old regime. So I think it will be, and even Ryan Cowden said the point was to create competition. So I think that's the goal, but I also think they're not going to hesitate if one of the old heads just isn't meeting their standards.
Let's get this guy's take on
I've been working on something here, and I can't pull them up because my computer died, but let's get one more thought here. Special guest as we wrap up our pre-draft coverage on CLNS Media, Evan Lazar in his Celtics championship hat. We don't have enough time to unpack that. How you feeling this morning, Evan?
I'm doing well, guys. How are we doing?
We're all
better now.
Pretty happy about the class. We were just talking about the finer points of the long snapper battle and what we're going to be watching for there. So if you want to pick us up right there and give us your takes on that, no, but you're obviously, we were both Will Campbell guys, so we'll take that off the board. Your favorite pick that the team made this weekend?
I would say my favorite picks were those back-to-back picks on day 3 on the defensive line, because it just kind of put a bow on the entire draft to me. I thought that was the one spot. After they took Woodson, I was like, they could really get into this edge class. Like, give me one of these edge guys, right? And then they take Braden Swinson and Joshua Farmer, who's a player that I liked as well. So I think we all can praise the top of the draft and be excited about the skill players in Campbell and Wilson. But that seemed to really put a bow on the whole thing by landing those 2 guys.
And then I got to ask you your favorite from the UDFA class, because we were just talking about that.
Yeah, CJ Dupree from Alabama, the tight end. I thought he was going to get drafted. I was pretty surprised that he made it to undrafted free agency. And I think we all probably have talked ad nauseum about potentially adding one of these young tight ends to the room and somebody that could develop behind Hunter Henry and Austin Hooper. And I think Dupree can definitely check that box as well. So the fact that they were able to scoop him up as an undrafted rookie, I really liked his blocking tape, thought he was one of the better day 3 blockers in this class. He tested well, so maybe there's some untapped receiving potential there as well. But I think he could definitely make this roster as a third blocking tight end, which if you're going to make the team, that's going to be your role right there. Special teams, blocking, that type of stuff.
So I got to say, I was Evan has begged for the separation receiver for years. I thought Kyle Williams and Efton Chisholm were going to be those 2 answers, but I think what he just did is kind of surmise what this Patriots offseason is about. 2 offensive linemen and a block, or 2 defensive linemen, a blocking tight end. Trenches. Evan, I'll ask you what I just asked the guys, and then we'll wrap it up here. Biggest storyline you're looking at heading into spring practices?
Oh, wow, that's a good one. I would say, I'm sure that we've all been there. When you watch the receivers in the spring practices, some of these guys just are instantly good, right? And you get really excited, and you get a little bit overzealous about some of it. Alex, Taekwon has burned me probably 2 straight training camps.
You're not going down to Bucks camp to watch Tez Johnson?
Yeah, right.
I'll go with you. You can watch Tez Johnson. I'll watch Desmond Watson. We'll report back.
Yeah, exactly. So the speed guys at receiver tend to flash in these non-padded practices. So I expect Kyle Williams to look good in the spring and early summer until the pads come on. So I'm going to try not to get duped by Kyle Williams, running by people when they can't actually, put their hands on them. So we'll see what happens there with him. So I'm excited to see what he does, though, and I'm intrigued by the skill set. Obviously, Barth was first again on Kyle Williams. You told me about Kyle Williams probably 8 months ago.
I actually found the text.
I found it. Humble brag, right? Yeah.
January 25th.
Yeah.
I texted Evan, I'm watching Kyle Williams from Washington State. Dude looks like a legit day 2 guy, and the consensus board has him at like 8:30. What am I missing?
Yeah, no, you weren't missing.
Oh, Barthy.
You weren't missing. Yeah, he's an exciting player for them, though, and just anybody that brings some game-breaking speed and explosiveness to that offense. And I can't stop watching him run by Travis Hunter in 2023, right? Like that's the rep right there that you're like, man, if he brings that to the Patriots and that translates to the NFL, we all know how good Drake May is at throwing the go ball. Like that's going to be a really fun connection between those guys. So I'm interested to see, obviously the skill players come the spring, but I'm going to try my best not to get too excited.
Are you going to stick around for goodbyes here? Or do you have to go start your 6-hour pregame Celtics playoff ritual?
I'll stick around.
All right. So as we wrap it up here, I mean, it's been quite the 4 months with you guys. I've enjoyed it. This was they're all unique, but as far as draft processes go, this one was as unique as they come. Just a weird class. I think this was the hardest draft I've covered, top to bottom. Not necessarily from the Patriots' point of view, although that was part of it. New regime, you got to learn new tendencies, but the class just really you had to know a lot of players. The projections were pretty murky compared to usual across the board. You had guys that could go 20, that could go 90. We started off talking about Jack Sawyer as a first-round pick. Where did he go? Won something?
Yeah.
To Pittsburgh, obviously. I know he went later on day 3, so but I enjoyed it. I had fun, and I appreciate it. We'll just go around. Tayler, your final thoughts on the NFL draft class of 2025 and the process.
I'd be very happy if I were Drake May. I think this regime committed to protecting him and adding weapons, and I truly think they did the best they could. Like Howden said, sometimes you take swings in free agency and it doesn't work out, but they came to the draft and they got it done in the first couple days.
Mike.
On the draft in general, Alex, you mentioned it being the craziest one. I mean, the Shedeur Sanders saga is the craziest thing the draft has seen in a long, long time. Mel Kiper gave them an A+ this morning. He was almost crying on ESPN set yesterday. So that mixed in with the Patriots kind of, helping out Drake May a lot. I think it's been a fun one. It's it's bittersweet with it being over. I think Alex can finally shut his eyes for the first time since Joe Milton beat the Buffalo Bills in Week 18. So no, it's fun. It's always fun covering it. We had about 12 plus hours of live draft coverage, Tayler and myself, and it makes it a lot more fun when we get so many guys in here, hanging out with us. So super, super exciting. And let's go on to the season now.
Evan, I was telling them, do you remember? So 2019 was the first year me and Evan covered the draft, and they were running out of gas on day 2. Me and Evan were live. If the longtime listeners will remember this, we were in the Patriots media room. This was so disrespectful. I can't believe we did this. We're in the middle of the room with everybody doing a live show. We would jump off. So they'd make the pick. We'd quick react. We'd jump off. And then so Evan could write. And then we jump back on 15 minutes later. I think we did 18, 19 hours live. It might have been more than that.
Yeah. Yeah.
For that first weekend. So
it was a marathon, and I remember Alex wrote on his like a notepad to like little notes, and then he would just like tap his pen to try to tell me things like while we were doing the show. And so he was like kept on telling me to retweet the link to the show on my Twitter and stuff like that, and we just were rolling. And I mean, we've come a long way since then, but just going all the way back to 2019.
I actually counted I overshot that a little bit. 9 hours 25 minutes 24 seconds. 8 hours 20 minutes of it were live.
That's nothing. Me and
Taylor
were
you made it sound.
12 plus hours across 3 days.
You must have kicked us off late on day 3, Evan. You were probably all right. So
probably.
Company's growing. Good job, guys.
It was. Go ahead, Brian. Go ahead.
No, you can go because I wanted.
I was going to come back to you for your wrap up. So I was just a sidetrack that I shouldn't have even gone on because I was wrong. Brian, your final thoughts on the draft?
Well, I wanted to just end. We did this last year to end the show, and I went back and looked. A look ahead to 2026. We're going to put all you on the spot. One player. Last year, my one player was Colston Loveland. Mike, you had Shedeur Sanders.
Of course.
Taylor, you picked Travis Hunter because he was the only player you knew.
What were we picking for? The Patriots pick or like best player?
Patriots pick.
Why did you pick Shedeur Sanders?
I took Shedeur.
Mike just said I'm interested. Mike just said I'm interested to watch Shedeur Sanders, and that was his analysis. Barth, you had Luther Burden, but then, in kind of credit to you, you said Will Campbell tackle, but you emphasized that, or you prefaced that by saying if Javon Baker and Jalen Polk are star wide receivers, then they can go tackle top of the draft, and I like Will Campbell. So you got the pick right, but the process to get there wasn't exactly right.
There.
So 2026, who's everyone's one guy to watch for? Way too early.
Taylor.
Although we hit a couple first rounders in that. So.
I'll go.
Mike's going to take Arch Manning.
No, I am taking a quarterback. Oddly enough, Garrett Nussmeier. Will Campbell is dating Garrett Nussmeier's sister.
Taylor, go ahead.
That's pretty cool.
Can't do worse than that. For the Patriots.
He could be a developmental guy. Put him in the room behind Drake May, and go from there. They didn't take their developmental guy.
Developmental guy might go in the first round,
like you wanted so bad. So Garrett Nussmeier, QB3, and
if we were doing around the horn style right now, you would have just been muted and like minus 1,000 points.
Taylor, go ahead. Who do you got?
Who's Alabama's left tackle? Is that Proctor?
Caden Proctor.
Yeah.
Caden Proctor.
It's not a good vouch for Will Campbell, but that could look like a good pick.
I just think you want to maximize him, don't you?
All right. Well, I also hope they're not picking that high. But
okay, yeah, that's also
Brian.
I don't know anybody else. You asked me second.
Fair enough. Look, you might end up being right. You who knows? If Campbell has to kick inside, you might end up being right. And if they're picking that high, it probably means Campbell wasn't good at left tackle. So it's not unrealistic. It's just a little pessimistic. Brian.
I'll go. I'll stay with Bama. I love Jahad Campbell in this draft, so I'll just take the guy who's filling in for him, Deontay Lawson. Like, basically the same mold, great in coverage, he can play the run. So Lawson, my early look ahead.
Evan.
Proctor's a good pick by Taylor, even if one's a left, one's a right tackle, right? I mean, Morgan Moses is 34 years old, so at some point they're going to have to worry about that. But I'm a receiver guy. I'm going Cardinal Tate, Ohio State. I just feel like that will be pretty much all of our assumptions right now is that number one wide receiver is going to be near the top of the list next year again. And I think Cardinal Tate's going to be a star.
So Brian, you went, right? You took,
I know who Alex is going to pick already.
Well, so, all right, I'm going to pick two guys like I did last year because I suck. The guy I want them to get is Caleb Downs, the safety from Ohio State. That dude is unbelievable. He can play deep. He can play box. He can play everywhere, and he makes plays on the ball constantly.
They should not be picking there.
That's what I was going to say. Yeah. If they are picking that high, one, they have bigger needs than a safety, and two, it's just unfortunate. So I'm also going to dip into receiver. I don't think Nick Harbor is going to come out next year. I think it's going to be another year. Casey Concepcion from NC State transferred to Texas A&M. He doesn't have the size and I know they need that size, but you put him with the player we think Kyle Williams is going to be. It's a lot of speed. It's a lot of separation. He's, really good hand, solid catch radius. So he was unbelievable 2 years ago for NC State. Kind of fell off last year because their quarterback play was terrible. I think he goes to Texas A&M. He bounces back. Patriots get him, dare I say, in the late teens. That's going to be my pick. So,
All right.
I just saw a mock draft 2026 with Garrett Nussmeier first overall.
Okay,
so
Mike.
I'll rescind that one.
I can't believe we're doing 2026.
He has the
mock
pocket
draft.
presence
My
of a
goodness.
boulder. Okay. You got to let it go on that one. All right. So on that note, we'll wrap it up for our draft coverage.
Could have picked Drew Aller. I'm surprised he didn't go there, or whoever the next Ole Miss quarterback.
I love Drew Aller.
Which quarterback is just like the worst person?
The what?
The worst person. That's who Mike. All right, we're gonna wrap it up there.
We'll find that.
We're gonna wrap it up there again. Thank you so much, everybody who tuned into all of our draft coverages here. More on those guys coming down the road. We will discuss those names more, but we're gonna take a little bit off first because I am off to the beach. Finally, this is my last show, but I will. What do you remember how? In addition to those picks, do you remember how last year's show ended?
Yeah, you said you were Brian, right?
Right. So let's see if I can get this right. For Tayler Kyles, Mike Kadlick, Brian Hines, and Evan Lazar, I am Alex Barth. Thank you all so much for tuning in all draft season. Taylor and Mike will be back later this week. Me and Brian will be back later this week. Me and Evan will have Catch 22 on Wednesday. We'll talk to you all then. Bye.
Bye.
Somebody else has to end it. My computer died. I'm on the guest.
Oh, I got it. I forgot.